Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Richest Men in Town podcast. I'm Mike Freeman, and along with my good friend and co-host Tyler Gould, we're excited to welcome you to our little podcast project. Tyler and I are just a couple of middle-aged husbands and dads driven to live our best lives. We want to be better every day, so here we'll be sitting down with great people. Not famous people, but great people that we admire, to learn their secret to living the rich life. Probably not the rich life you're thinking of. Our guests come in humbled and surprised at the invitation and hopefully leave feeling proud and grateful, realizing just how good they really have it. So pull up a chair, stay a while, and raise a glass with us as we toast our guests to the richest men in town. All right, Tyler Gould, it's Thursday night. It's Richest Men in Town night. And this week, we have one of my friends, Tony Schwegerl. Schwegerl from here in Reading. Tony's a great, great guy. I've admired him, love the way he's living his life. I reached out to him with the invitation and he jumped in, right? Jumped in. What are you taking away from our time tonight with Tony?
Look, anytime I get to hang out with someone who tells me that their childhood was Mayberry, I'm in, man. I'm all in on that. You know,
Straight up, Dad was a police chief.
Dad was a police chief with, didn't you say the courthouse and the 3 jail cells? I mean, it sounded like it was something straight out of Mayberry. So
yeah. So in the pre-show, get this, in the pre-show, he's telling us that his dad would arrest people, take their keys for being drunk, and the guys would just show up at the house the next morning, and Tony would jump up on a stool and grab their keys and hand it to them.
Yeah, it doesn't get much more Mayberry than that.
But it was like quintessential kind of in our mind, just that Americana, American town. And he talks about the village, right?
Yeah.
Takes the village.
Well, and look, I love, you know, all kidding aside, the Mayberry thing is a great starting point for the story, but Tony does really paint a picture of a journey of redemption and of connecting himself to the things spiritually that matter most to him. And I thought it was, it was inspiring to see someone who was so vulnerable with some of the things that they had gone through in their life, but really worked hard to put themselves back in a position to feel connected to God again.
Yeah, I dig that. I dig that word redemption. And that word comes up from time to time with our guests as we get into folks and their journeys and in the path, but truly a lost and found.
Yeah.
Truly, he was escaping some things. That escapism turned into some things that a lot of people honestly don't come back from.
Yeah. And
so the idea that we're talking to Tony right now, and Tony's in his place in life with the faith that he's carrying, that came across in our conversation as just downright miraculous.
Yeah, it was really authentic. And look, you know, the reality is that Tony paints a picture of people that are placed in his life that it seems somewhat random, that end up having long lasting impact on his trajectory in life. So it was an inspiring story. I enjoyed our time with Tony. It was fun, Mike. I always appreciate when I get to meet someone new. It was a party night, richest man in town night.
Tony kind of reminds me of that ripple analogy, right? You throw a pebble in, and Tony's doing his thing. He's a service provider. He provides care to people. I think that's his gift, and I think he stumbled on it. He stumbled on it early. Saw, he was a dishwasher at the hospital, and he saw some of these people and heard some of the things they were talking about, and said, "I want some of that."
Yeah.
And, and we admire that. And I think that he also has those lessons from his hospice experience. And I think nothing teaches us the value of life like looking at folks as they're about to leave this life.
Yeah,
and I think that did something for Tony. Tony let us in a little bit on that. So to Tony, thank you for the way you show up, brother. Thanks for the life that you're living. To all of our listeners, I hope you enjoy the journey and the path and the story that Tony shares with you. So do something with Tony Schwegerl on this latest episode of The Richest Men in Town. I'm excited about this stage. I'm excited about school starting. Not too crazy about where we are with the battle on.
Oh, that's right. School has not started where you're at.
Yeah, we're rolling. We're rolling next week. Next week.
Yeah, we're like a sports tryouts and everything is already flowing down here.
Masking up down there, right?
I mean, yeah, the kids haven't they're in masks while they're in classrooms.
Yeah.
Outside they can take them off, but
this thing's a gift that keeps giving, man. Just keeps giving.
Just keeps on giving, man.
I'm concerned, man. It's Delta variant. Don't we have like a bunch of alphabet letters left? I mean, Delta's only D.
And what happens when we get to lambda? You know what I mean? That's trouble. That's trouble, man.
Hey, can we talk tonight about our guest?
Yeah, fill me in about our guest, Tony.
All right. So a good friend of mine, Tony Schwegerl, is joining us. And the way I said that last name, I just kind of throw it out there because I always mispronounce it. So we're just going to call him Tony.
I like that. I read the last name and I thought, I like Tony.
Yeah. You know? Well, I thought you would like it because you read it and it kind of looks like a pastry. And you're Danish.
Yeah, I am. And I love so pastries.
Your mouth probably starts watering. Especially, you're on a low calorie thing and a guy named Schwegerl comes up and you're like, whoa, that's German or something.
Yeah.
Some butter on that bad boy. Let's
slather it up. Let's go.
So, Tyler, this show, this Richest Man in Town, is about sucking the nectar out of life, right? Sucking the marrow out. Well, it's come up before that, man, the lessons that people might learn in a hospice type setting.
Right.
And like people at the end of their life, and what can that teach us about living now? And boom, enter Tony. Tony is a registered nurse, LVN, I believe. I don't know the difference. RN, LVN, CNA. I'm not even sure.
Yeah,
I think he wears scrubs, and he's a nurse. Okay.
Yeah.
So Tony Schwegerl is he's got an amazing story. He's got a really cool story. I'm looking forward to it. Tony is one of the kind of guys that you'll appreciate, Tyler, because when I get in a room, I feel I'm making new connections in my brain, right? I'm learning things, seeing life from a different perspective, and I appreciate Tony. I appreciate Tony's authenticity. Anyways, I'm just gonna press the admit button here.
Let Tony
in to the richest men in town. You know what I mean?
Yeah, bring it on is what I say.
Tony, welcome to the richest men in town, brother. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Good. We're excited to have you.
How is, from what I'm seeing of myself, the window behind me is quite a glare. I'm surprised at that because it's so smoky and not really sunny outside, but I can close that.
No worries. Hey,
it's
no
quite
worries.
Angelic, Tony, as a matter of fact.
Actually gives you a nice angelic hue behind you, but
that's right.
The video isn't going towards any commercial purpose, so I think we're okay as long as you're okay with it.
I'm okay if it isn't bothering you.
Nope, not at all. We're good. We're good.
How are things?
Things are okay.
Let's just jump in. We were talking a little bit, Tony, I'm not going to make any reference to your age or anything, but do you remember your senior year in high school?
Well, gosh, I was pretty loaded all day, every day. I remember it. It didn't serve me, or rather, I didn't serve it well. I had to take some extra to be able to get through it because I was so distracted with drugs of choice.
All right, we got to get into this Tony story.
Yeah,
it's not ready.
Tony's throwing some teaser information out there for us, Tyler. Anyways, Tony, I was talking to my son who's getting ready to start his senior year, and so we were kind of we're talking a little bit about, picturing how you want things to go, and making sure that we were talking a little bit of everything.
Sure.
I taught him, I don't know if you boys understand this or even go with this, but I taught him that while the whole world is chasing those girls on the A list, those girls on the B list are pretty cool, and they're lonely Friday nights.
Oh, that's some advice, Dad. You gotta get your son a date, for crying out loud. Whatever it takes, man.
That's neither here nor there. I'm not quite sure. I'm dad of the year on that advice.
Well, they're only on the B list because they put equal attention to their studies, and they're very successful today. Everyone, no doubt.
That's true.
And we talked a little bit about shallow and deep, right? Shallow people, deep people, hanging out with people that are going to make you better.
Well, one of the things that you talked about earlier was Abe wanted to be friends with everybody, right? And I think when you have that mindset, you're erasing lists, right? You're just putting people in the pot.
Talk to me about erasing lists,
right? You're just erasing the list, and you're just putting people in the pot, and you're hanging out with them all, right? And I think,
Tyler, is that realistic? Is that possible?
It's possible.
That whole erasing list thing?
Yeah.
Because the lists are there. They exist for a reason, right? I mean, there's a social structure to high school and beyond. I love that idea of just hanging out with people. You know, we were talking a little bit about a training I offered today. And one of the thoughts was, you know, how do we combat biases?
Right.
Right. And this bias. And one of the things that came out of our discussion was increasing the frequency of contacts with people that are different than you.
Yeah.
And as you increase the frequency of contacts with people that are different, all of a sudden those biases just start kind of crumbling down. Those lists start dissolving, and people are just people.
Yeah. And there's so much fun, right? You get to know people, and you learn about backgrounds and just experiences. I mean, there's a lot of commonality in those things. So, and if you can figure that out when you're in high school, shoot, life is going to be a heck of a lot easier moving forward, man. Of a lot easier. So that said, I think that, you know, he's going to get plenty of dates, and they're just going to be no list, man.
But we did talk about this. We talked a little bit about this. You get you lock her down and get a girlfriend. Your boys miss you, right?
Yeah.
Months go by, and then she wants to hang out with her friends, and that senior year you're graduating, you're gonna have a ton of regrets because, like, dang, I miss my boys. You know. Yeah. That was my message, anyways. That was my spin. I don't know.
All right, that's a good spin. I liked it. I like it, man. I like it. I'm buying it. I'm buying what you're selling.
Yeah, this episode is not brought to you by girlfriends.
Tony, so let's get into your life a little bit. Can you talk to me about how you know my good friend Mike Freeman, and what you thought when Mike gave you a call and said, "Hey, Tony, I've got a podcast that you need to come on and spill your guts."
Just like that. That's exactly.
I think that's his intro line right there.
You were more than willing, and that's kind of a rare thing. But what was running through your mind as I extended that to you?
Because of the title of your podcast and the reference material and the whole aspect of the project, I just thought, well, this is just something I would subscribe to. I'd like to see that. And it's, excuse me, you want me to be part of it? Again, honor plus. I just felt so proud that I had made a friend that had such a desire to involve me in something of such a caliber. I was very, very humbled, very much so.
Well, we're glad that you're here. And, you know, the podcast is about exploring our lives together, right? And kind of making connections and finding out what it takes for each of us as we travel the path to find some richness in our lives and find some blessings in our lives and find a way to pass that on and pay it forward. I would love, Tony, to hear a little bit about your background. We talked the other night in our pre-show call, and you made some Mayberry references that I was loving, and I want to get into that a little bit. But can you talk a little bit about your background growing up, mom and dad, siblings, and what that looked like?
Okay. First of all, I'm very grateful to be talking to someone that does have an understanding of Mayberry, because very few people even know how it's spelled because it was so yesterday.
We'll include it in the show notes for our younger audience.
Amen, dude. Yeah.
But I literally was Opie Taylor, I'm telling you. Dunsmuir, you know that saying that says it takes a village to raise a child? I lived in that village, because there were times I would walk home from school, and quite a few times I'd have something pinned to my chest for my mother to receive when I got home that had been witnessed by who knows who, but somebody in town, I was either throwing rocks at windows in cars or just skipping rocks where they shouldn't be skipped, and just kid stuff. But yeah, that happened a lot. We'd get home and mom would go, "Oh, that's interesting." And she'd take it off and she goes, "I'm surprised to find that there." And I said, "Well, I was told not to touch it because a phone call was going to happen to make sure that I hadn't touched it, just so you knew what was going on." And I had my excuses all made. And anyhow, my mom belonged to at least 3 or 4 major sororities in town. Everything that happened that involved some kind of organization, my mother was the head of. My dad was chief of police, which didn't give her much of a choice. But, and they were both very loved and respected. I was raised Catholic. The Mass was in Latin back then. And I was an altar boy. I had it memorized backwards and forwards. But I was pretty much put on a pretty high pedestal because of my family and who they were. And I was treated like a little Lord Fauntleroy because I pretty much came across that way. And a little bit later on, when I got a little older, when attitude kind of started taking over and teenage years started, I got a little rebellious because I wanted my friends that I didn't have yet. Because I was the church boy, I was the cop's kid, all that. And I put my family through a lot of stress in my high school years, which one of the things I was going to say about Mike's son is that one of the things you hear growing up, and he's probably heard it 1,000 times, you're never going to go anywhere without that high school diploma. I can't tell you how many times and how many sources I heard it from. Well, I didn't have that high school diploma because I got into drugs, extremely involved in drugs. And things that most kids would do on a Friday night as a group, I enjoyed the Friday night so well, I would take my little hit of LSD and I would cut it into fourths. I wouldn't take the whole thing like everybody else did. I'd take a fourth and go to school. But every day I had it, every single day for so long. I was so drug involved that I could not function without it, but it wasn't obvious to me because I was never without it. And
Tony, can I stop you really quick on that?
Okay.
From where you sit now in life, looking back, what was that drug giving you?
I don't know what I was looking for, but because of the major enhancement in creative visualization, let me say, full color, let me say, but escape, just an escape. I guess it was the pressure of being number one all the time. And it was no pressure on my mother and father to do that. It was just always having to be Mr. Right, the good guy. And I guess it started out as escapism, and then it just took control. My family really weren't aware of that, though, as far as the control factor, everything. I pretty much covered myself pretty well. It was only after I had left home and I moved to Wairika. And that was my first apartment and all of that, and new town. That's when things really took a different turn because most of the people that I came in contact with were where I was as well, very much involved in that. Yeah.
So did you get your high school diploma before you left, or are you in Wairika without your diploma?
I am in Wairika without a diploma. I went to work at Siskiyou General Hospital as a dishwasher, and that paid my really cute little studio apartment. It was only $50 a month back then. So I had lots of room for, guess what? And that's pretty much where it all went. And for the longest time, I didn't have any judgments, and I was a good guy, a good person, never was mean to anyone. But that was my life. And I'll tell you about, 3 or 4 years passed in that same attitude for so long. And one day I was in the park and some girl approached me, and I'm leaning up against an oak tree and I have an oak leaf in front of me, and I'm looking through the leaf at the sun while everything is melting into itself. And she sits down beside me, and I've never met her before. And I thought, oh, that's pretty bold. And she introduced herself, and she started telling me, what do you see? What are you looking at? Can I share? And it was just, she was playing me and I didn't know it. And so I thought we were having a good conversation. And all of a sudden she says, you know, when you come down and what you think you're seeing right now leaves with it, I can still see what I'm looking at. And she said, do you know what's on the other side of that leaf? That sun that you're looking at? It's called the light of Christ. And I will walk away with it in my heart. I had it when I sat down, but I'll have it with me. And maybe we'll see each other again. And I just watched her walk away. And I thought, well, that was pretty weird. What time was that when I saw her? Maybe she goes to the park every day about that. It was about noonish. So I got there at 10 and I sat there all day. And all of a sudden, Sally came and sat down beside me again. And we had a long talk. And it was very enjoyable. She suggested that, she says, you know, I could tell you a lot of things about the way I feel, but I'm not as educated in speech to be able to share with you appropriately what a couple friends could do for me. If you would let me, if you'd come over to my house, I'm only a block away, and give them an opportunity. And we'll all just sit down and talk. Because I got a lot of questions, but I've got a lot of answers that solved a lot of questions, and I'd like to share them with you. And I said, okay, only can we go to my house, because I only live 2 blocks away, and I forgot to feed my dog. It's funny how I'm remembering these things, but that's exactly how it happened. I met her at her house, and she and I walked over to mine, which was just about a block away from her. And we're sitting there, someone knocks on the door, and I open the door, and it's 2 suits with name tags. And I just turned and I said, I'm sorry, I'm a Catholic. I appreciate what you probably want to share with me, but I'm already a believer in something else. And then Sally says, oh, Tony, these are my 2 friends. I'm sorry. They followed us over. They just got here a little bit late. They put some space between us walking so that they could introduce themselves by a door knock. It's what they do. And I invited them in, and we sat down and talked. And I thought I was dealing with Amish. Never heard of a Mormon. Had no clue what a Mormon was. Never even heard the word before. And when they started talking to me, and I thought, wait a minute, are you smoking crack? This kid sat down. No, he was on his knees, and went back and forth like this. It was a lot of joviality too. It was really good for me, because I'm not one of those that you get close to real easily at that point. And Jesus, he prayed and he asked for help. And it says right here in the Bible, and she read the King James and said, okay, that makes sense. But Jesus and his Father, who must be God, because if he's the Son of God, he would be, right? She goes, that's exactly what happened. And I said, well, they did a 3-way in conversation. They just sat and talked to each other. That does not happen. I said I was Catholic. I know it doesn't work that way. And she says, well, how about if you just reserve your questions and we go through the first lesson and let them share that? And at that time, they were not using a flip chart. They did everything on a felt board. And when they were putting the felt board together, and they asked me what was Jesus Christ's first church? How did it get founded? How did it get built? And I said, well, with Jesus. I said, okay, perfect. So they put him down there. Then they said, and who did he have with him? Apostles. And they put the apostles on top of him. and gradually built the church. And then they pulled the foundation out from under the church by pulling Christ away through his death. And the apostles also dying as they were trying to preach the gospel. Each one of them were taken. And the church fell. And they explained it as though it were a glass vase that just got dropped and shattered in a million pieces. And so many different people picked up a different piece. And the piece they had everything that worked for them, but they didn't have the full package. And that's when the Dark Ages came. And it all of a sudden just started sucking me in because I had never heard that concept before. I don't remember exactly where it was. It was something in the Book of Mormon that was read to me that I said, okay, so what you're actually telling me is this young 14-year-old boy asked God to tell him what he should do, what church he should join. And they said there was not a church on earth that was the very church that was Jesus Christ. And that has been restored as though Jesus himself is on the earth again and all that. And they said, yes, that's exactly what happened. And I just started bawling. It was a totally different concept. And I had to question it. I had to think. Before the first lesson was over with, I was a basket case because they had totally pulled the foundation out from under me. I was raised to believe in Catholicism, and all Christian churches were fragments of that, but we were the founders. I mean, Peter is on the right side of the Vatican. His grave is under the cornerstone there, according to Catholicism. I mean, I kept hammering all this stuff out there, and I said, well, that's a good belief. And you know how they say that, good for you. It's not true, but it works for you. So I asked for a second meeting, and the second meeting was 2 days later. And the same thing happened. And I finally said, well, I don't want to I'm sorry, I don't want to be on a list. Every day, come over for lunch. Whatever your schedule is, you got to eat lunch sometime. So eat it here. And we'll do a lesson at the same time. And I went through all the lessons in 1 week. I had decided I needed to be baptized. And they made the arrangement. It was up in Medford at the Stake Center, which is where the baptismal font was. The church in in Wairika, was so small that as soon as in the chapel you folded up the chairs, it became a cultural hall. It's just a one-room place, very small. And so I said, well, I can't go to Medford. I can't do a baptismal font. Jesus didn't use a baptismal font. I need to be in the river. And they said they would check and see if that was okay. And a couple days later, Elder Dobson came back and told me that would be fine. And he says, so we'll need to reschedule your date then. And I said, oh, why do we have to wait? And he goes, well, Tony, you wanted the 24th. It's the 24th of November. There's snow on the ground. And I said, yes. And there's also a beach up towards Etna. It's called Jones Beach. That's where I have done a great deal of partying. That beach holds so many memories. I won't even go into detail, but that's where I need to be baptized. I need to destroy those memories, and I need to have a memory of a different kind there, somewhere I can go to that's mine, anytime, day or night, rain or sunshine, snow. That's my baptism. And they agreed, and we did it that way. And one of the wonderful things that I didn't realize, of course, in baptisms in the church, you don't take pictures. It's a holy place. It's sacred. Cameras aren't involved. But we were at Jones Beach, and I had someone taking pictures. And we had a guitar instead of an organ, and we sang hymns instead of folk songs. I scheduled and arranged the whole thing. And someone took a picture of me going in the water and coming up out of the water. And I have it on my living room wall. And I drive up there often just to sit under the stars on that beach, because that is where my life began. Unfortunately, my ward in Wairika was very small, and most everyone there were considerably older than me. I was just turning 20, and there was no youth. Everybody my age was at the Y. They were in college. They were out of town. It was all the mom and dads. And I just, after a period of time when the elders were transferred, we didn't get new missionaries. And I thought, I must have been converted to them. Why don't I feel the way I used to feel? And I just started slipping. And I relapsed into drugs. And I went for a period where I was not in the church. I had gone inactive. And I moved to Reading. And at that point, pretty much the same scenario, drugs, alcohol, unmarried experiences, just countless. I cannot think of anything contrary to the gospel that I wasn't in the fullness of. And I received a phone call from my mother. She was up in British Columbia once my father had died. He was diabetic, and it took his life. And once he was gone, a year later, my mom remarried, and the gentleman she remarried was Canadian. And when their marriage fell apart, she came down to Reading and she called me. And she said she wanted to know more about my church. She wanted to go to church with me. I was not going to church. And I did not tell her that. I said, sure, okay. I picked First Ward. And I said, a lot of people there are going to act like they don't know me. And there's a good reason for that, Mom, because they don't. I just changed. There's a lot of, we have a lot of these buildings in town. A lot of Mormons down here. And yeah, so I don't know these people very well. So this will help you to settle in, because I don't know them either. And we sat down, and she enjoyed it. And a couple Sundays later, she asked me if I would secure some missionaries to give her the lessons. And as soon as she did that, I remembered trying to talk to her about the church when I had gone back after I'd left home. And I told her what had happened, that I'm born again, I'm different, and all this and that. And I don't want to hear about it. You're a Catholic. We are Catholic. I don't ever want to hear about religion, and blah, blah, blah. So I never pursued it any longer. But when I got my patriarchal blessing, I'm remembering the memory of trying to talk to Mom about the church. And in my patriarchal blessing, it told me to be patient with your mother, for she will hear and eventually accept the gospel. And she was using me to get the elders to teach her. And it just dropped me to my knees. And it was as though I had never walked away from the church. And there was so much youth in the ward, and so much activity, and I just threw myself into everything. And it basically saved my life, because I was doing everything, and a lot of it. And I did not go through therapy. I did not go through rehab. I did not do anything except ask the lawyers. The ones I never wanted to talk to, that's for sure. And when I told the missionaries that I needed a blessing, can you take this away from me, please? And they told me that it might not be that easy, but a blessing most definitely was. But it may take some time, and I need to help. They let them help me secure some assistance. And I said, no, I don't need that. I just need you to give me a blessing, and it's done. It's over. And they did. And it was. I never had a problem. Well, stomach ache, a lot of stomach aches and some throwing up. But I mean, I didn't have any problems with needing therapy and other involvement. I just needed their blessing me. I had so much faith and belief in who they were and what they taught. And well, that's pretty much where I am right now.
Hey, Tony, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I'm curious about that afternoon in the park in Wairika, looking through the leaf at the sun, and your, that experience where I think it was Sally came over and spoke with you. What have you ever thought about what it was that was said at that time that caused you to take pause and listen to what she was saying? I mean, right? Because we have a lot of experiences in life where people will come up and say something, and some of those they just flow right by us, and some of those hit us between the eyes, and but sometimes we take action, sometimes we don't. I'm curious. I mean, you're looking at that leaf into the sun, and you've probably had a good morning, right, thus far. And I'm just curious, what caused you at that point in time to let those words sink in and accept her invitation to have a chat?
It was the way she delivered it. She looked at me. We didn't even know each other. And she put her hand on my cheek, and she just left it there. And she said, when you come down and what is satisfying you right now is gone, I will still have in my heart and in my vision, when I look at the sun, I see the light of Christ, because that is truly what it is. I know that. I don't have to learn that. It's part of me. It's who I am. I'm taking it as I walk away from you. And if we're lucky enough to see each other again, I'll have it with me when we come back. And when I watched her walk away, I felt so empty, so worthless, just absolutely worthless. No belief system of any kind, and no desire for one. And that's why I went back to the park at 10 o'clock the next morning. She didn't come back until it must have been 1:30 or 2. It was middle of the afternoon anyway. But at that point, I was ready to hear whatever she had to say. And when I asked her, why do you feel that way? How did that happen? Is that the way you were raised? Or she, no. And then she told me about herself, and it was the same scenario. A lot of drugs, a lot of promiscuousness, and the missionaries happened to her house. They knocked on her door. Her parents didn't want to hear anything after the first discussion, but because they did it as a family, she was there to hear the first discussion. And she sought them out when she saw them. Wairika's a small town, and she saw them on bicycles. And she followed them with her bicycle until they finally pulled over, and she asked if they could meet in the park and continue. And so that's what they did. And that was about maybe a couple months before she and I talked. So she was a very recent convert and full of the Spirit.
Tony, can I just ask too, I don't know. I'm assuming you realize how lucky you are, because many of the things that you had in your life destroy people's lives.
Yes.
And a lot of people take those detours of drugs and alcohol and some of those other things, and they don't come back. And some of them wrestle with addiction their whole life. And even to the extent that they lose their lives. What goes through your mind as you tell this journey and this path that you took?
I can't tell you how many funerals I have been to, how many friends I have lost. There was one thing that we used to do that Paisano, black, dark Dago red wine, nickel of cocaine, couple hits of acid, some mescaline, psilocybin, mushrooms, all this stuff. You shake it up, you light the fire, and you sit around a campfire and pass the bottle and talk and visit. Camp, kind of like, with each other. And all of a sudden, everybody starts coming on to this stuff. But everybody's different. Who knows how many of what one person had over another? Well, it didn't work perfectly for everyone. A lot of times there were hospital interventions and no success in retrieving the individual. Another part of my patriarchal blessing, the very beginning. You have been guided, guarded, and protected, that you would hear the gospel and accept it. And I look at my life, the way I lived it, and taking the same drug as someone else, the same. This is my half, this is your half. We went in on it monetarily, but it wasn't cheap. It's all we had. We cut it in half. He's dead. I'm not. The constant reminders, not that I am special or I'm anything. I am not all that. I am not by a long shot. But when I look at the total vehicles, I leave my home and I start the car and I'm like, what am I forgetting? What am I forgetting? Okay, I've got my money, got my wallet, got my driver's license, obviously car keys, my beer. I'd stop and go inside and get a beer to put between my legs to drink while I'm driving. Years of that. Years of it. Car accidents that should have killed me. By the looks of the vehicle, you would think so. It did happen, but it didn't. And I couldn't possibly relate to you as many times that those circumstances happened. And all the while I had been, his footprints were the only ones in the sand. And I should have been dead 1,000 times. I know that there is purpose. I know that I have a place and things to do. And I have been blessed and protected and guided and guarded.
So Tony, talking about purpose and things to do, I know Mike has made reference to the work that you're involved in now and your career now. Can you talk about tell us a little bit about what you do and talk about your path to that career?
Well, again, my first job when I left home was a dishwasher in a hospital, Siskiyou General Hospital. And everyone would come up at their lunchtime to the dining room, which was adjacent to the kitchen, and it was all open to each other with a snack bar between the two. I was the one on the kitchen side of the snack bar dishing up those and snapping. punch in their cards that they had purchased. And they're all in hospital greens and nursing uniforms. And I'd hear conversations from them at the tables that they were at and such. And I had a desire I said, wow, what would it feel like? I'm washing somebody else's dishes. It's paying the rent. But it isn't like, oh my gosh, it's time to go to work. I'm so excited. Not a bit of that was happening. Nothing substantial. And I asked my boss, I heard they need an orderly on second wing. And I thought if it would be all right with you, I could do that part-time. And she said, well, let me talk to the charge nurse down there and see if we can get some training in line for you. She thought I needed a taste of it to realize that it wasn't for me. And God bless her for giving me that opportunity. When I did it and I realized how fulfilling it was, someone they're in bed, and some of them are simple cases and they'll come and go, but some of them aren't. And everybody touched me in a way that nobody has ever touched me before. I felt every single person in a different way. And so I went on and got my certified nursing assistant certification and went to work on the floor. And after 2 years of doing that, I went to College of the Siskiyous in Weed, where they had an LVN program, licensed vocational nurse. And I got my nursing degree. And when I came back down to Reading, I went to Memorial Hospital, which is now Shasta Regional. It was simply a one-story, small little building. A lot of training on the job occurred back in those days. It doesn't happen now. I was trained as what they called an OR tech. And what I did is I sterilized the surgical instruments after surgery and prepared them for staying on the shelf until they were needed again. I got to go in and observe surgeries because that was right next to the surgery room. And all of a sudden that triggered, oh my gosh, I have got to have this. And so I got some on-the-job training as an OR tech and was 8 years at Mercy doing that. Actually doing everything a scrub nurse would do. Passing instruments, passing sponges, counting the sponges and making sure the doctor didn't leave any inside, all the stuff. It was such a life. I absolutely loved it. But I'm never satisfied. I loved that, working at the hospital and such, but it got tiring. And so I got into physical therapy. That wore itself out on me, and then respiratory therapy. And these were all things that back then you couldn't do today. You had to go to school for these things. But there was a lot of on-the-job training done back then. And I had so many different aspects. But because the church was such a part of my life at this time, and the Book of Mormon was in my back pocket at work, I used the bathroom a lot just to squeeze in a couple chapters during my work schedule every single day. And nursing homes, for some reason, when I wound up in nursing homes, that's where I found that's where I needed to be. Because these were people that have been, they're too much to handle. We can't do it anymore. So mom goes to a home and a family lives a couple 100 miles away or something, and they're alone, completely alone, after all they have given their families, after all they had learned and grown to be. They're alone, to die alone. And that was my place. And when I went to school for a nursing degree, I met I met my spouse, who was a hospice nurse. And it was before hospice really existed. It's just that the need for that type of nursing atmosphere was always a need. And then when hospice came into being, that's what happened. And once I tasted of it, I couldn't let it go. And we did it together. The only thing we ever had to talk about was, how was your day? And we talked about the same thing. We made up names so that we didn't break any HIPAA laws, but we talked about our livelihood, and we spent our evenings together. We spent the weekends together. We made up excuses when people called to see if we wanted to go to dinner. He's at work, or she's at work, or this is happening. And we just sit back down on the couch and cuddle back up and watch the continued reruns of Hallmark. No friends, no desire for friends. A terminal illness came into being, which we had the same situation where there was Catholicism before. And in Catholicism, if you have been married and you divorce and you remarry, it's okay for a guy to remarry. But if a woman remarries, she's an adulteress because she's already been committed to marriage and is doing a second marriage. And it was pretty much a gospel that was pretty much, I love everyone in the Catholic Church. They're good people. There's just some teachings that didn't work for me, but we were together for many years. I proposed in ICU 10 days before departure. And I'm glad I did that, because 38 years were able to be sealed in a way that was very meaningful. And it was a gift for me, pretty much at the time. But anyway, I went back to hospice. And the desk that we shared was now my desk. But hospice, let's say there's a lady that's in her 80s, if she's fortunate enough to be 90s, and she and her husband sat in front of the fireplace watching their TV together. All of a sudden, it's a hospital bed. All of a sudden, he died in that hospital bed. And nobody's built a fire since. Nobody's mowed the lawn since. They have no children or grandchildren. And now she is alone in that house with nothing but memories. That's where hospice comes in. Closure is the most wonderful thing to be able to help someone have that otherwise would not have the opportunity. And I could not promote hospice greater to anyone. It is very important. But the one thing that, oh my gosh, we're doing a podcast. Oh, well, here it is. Everybody's hearing it. You do not bring religion to work. You do not preach the gospel. You do not try and convert people. You do your job. You do your medications. Wow. I have done all the right things, but I have crossed the line. And if I'm blessed enough to where the wrong person doesn't hear this, I will cross the line again. Because the opportunity to share the gospel with someone that's about to cross over, they don't know what I know. And they're not going to leave this planet until they do. And it has been a blessing to be a part of it. And so now at my point in life, it's been 2 years. I have not any closure. Every day is as the first.
When I think of the hundreds of thousands of people that have left the earth without hearing the gospel of Jesus Christ, and the opportunity of bringing that to them through genealogy, at least when they hear it on the other side, their physical work has been performed for them on this side. And that is all I live for, is to frequent the temple as much as I can possibly do. I work at the, genealogy center, history center. And before I go to the temple, and I try and average a couple times a month, I will ask, there's several computers, there's 6 or 8 people in there. And I said, okay, I'm going down to the temple on Friday. I've got a lot of work to do, but it's a long day. I'm only be using a little piece of it, so I need some printouts. I know you can't go because your husband's at work or because you are at work. Nobody can go to the temple as often as they'd like to. Well, I can. I need your work, and I will do it. And if I can't do it, I will observe who does, and I will make sure that before I leave that temple, what I carried in with me has been done. And I do that without failure. And it is such a righteous feeling to be able to bless someone else who can't do their genealogy. And not just taking names that find their way to the temple, but taking them from someone I know and doing the work for them. I'm sorry, I don't know why I went into that, but that's
okay. Hey, Tony, I imagine this show, we try to value life's lessons, and I can imagine that sacred space standing next to a person dying is pretty special, and a great place to learn valuable life lessons. What has being a hospice care provider taught you about life?
It doesn't matter who it is. Just learning genealogy and realizing that it's just a few generations between us and we're tied together. We are all related. You find it every time you do genealogy that there is so little that stands between anybody, that we are all family. We are all truly brothers and sisters. And I witnessed childbirth. And when you see a baby for the very, very, very first time, when they come into the world and they are lifeless, they aren't moving, they're not anything. And all of a sudden they are, and their color starts to change and the noise starts happening. And the spirit, the room is so full of the spirit. That very same thing happens when someone exits. I have felt that. I was present. Well, I lived at the hospital pretty much. I came home and showered and went straight back. But when it got all of a sudden really bad at home, and we went to the hospital, I expected treatment would happen and it would be over. And it would be done, no problem. It was just peritonitis. It's very common and it's treatable. But at this point, it had taken both kidneys and part of the liver, and there would not be a way to surgically create the situation because there just wasn't enough life energy to survive the procedure. So I was there. Room 105, the first floor at Mercy, is the room that is used when all has been done that can be done. That's where the person goes. And that's the last stop. And I knew that. It's happened many times, but I was there when the very last breath was exhaled. And I knew that very moment that just like everybody else, and it happens to all of us, and it always will, but when that last breath is exhaled, when one of us a few seconds later would inhale, the eyes are opened in the spirit world. They gave up that body that no longer functioned for them, and they entered their spirit body. There is no more pain, no more physical comfort or discomfort, a youthful appearance, and never to taste of death again for time and all eternity. It is all forward motion now. I know that. I have that knowledge. And it just amazes me to think of how many do not, that they really start questioning their mortality when they lose someone they love, because you really stop and ask yourself, what really happens? Is there a place? Does life go on? It certainly does. And those that did not have the opportunity to hear the gospel, no one else teaches that opportunity is still available to them. No one else teaches that physical commanded act of baptism and everything that we do must happen, and that people go to a temple for people they don't even know so that they can be the physical body of the earthly needs for that individual who is standing in line to receive it on the other side, so they can go forward.
Tony, with all that you've experienced and these powerful experiences that you've had and the things that you've been able to witness, what gives you hope these days?
What gives me hope? I don't have a belief. I have an understanding. I don't have a desire. I have an awareness. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, that he is our elder brother, that he created a plan, or was part of the plan, to come to earth, to share the gospel, to make it possible for us to lay our bodies down and to take it up again in resurrection and have eternal life. But the only way that could happen is if he sacrificed himself.
Hey, Tony, we talked a little bit about that Mayberry upbringing, and as you think about your parents, how do you honor them today?
I was so very blessed. I had two of the most wonderful people to be my mother and father. Well, mother joined the church. She was baptized. She was confirmed. She was initiated, endowed. She was everything. I proxied my father in the Holy Temple with my mother across from me, that they might have the eternal marriage that is forever. And all of the work that he would have done had he had the gospel on earth before he died, I did that for him as well. So that when he hears the gospel on the other side, the earthly work was done. So they are both together, and they will be forever. I think of everything that a mother and a father do for their children. I don't remember ever having a babysitter. Mom and dad just didn't go out because they didn't leave us with anybody. And a cop's wages with a family of 6, it was about $400 a month. We had a nice home. I never wanted for anything, and none of my brothers did either. And to give them the gift that I've been able to give them for all they had given me, yes, I can't think of anything else I could possibly do more for them. They made me who I am.
Is there anyone else that you would like to honor as you think about the people that have come and gone in your life?
My spouse, who talked me into getting involved in nursing without talking me into it, just watching the treatment of others and listening to the tears in the middle of the night. Well, sleep is happening or not happening, dreams are happening, but seeing how much the patients affected, just somebody else's somebody, was always brought home, was always gone to bed with, as far as on their mind. And we constantly had the conversations about, well, so-and-so's probably on their way. I give it about 3 days. Oh, wow, I'm sorry, because I came to know the person through conversation, but that's all. And then I started feeling the same way when that happened to me. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the 38 years that we had, the compassion and the love that I witnessed, that I embraced, I absorbed, and I became part of. And I will continue to be that until I am no longer here. Actually, I can't tell you as far as who else I would think of in particular, because there is no one that is less than that person. No one. Something that I don't know where I heard this, if I ever heard it, or if it's just something I created and thought and felt and can't let go of. Let's just use Saddam Hussein as someone that everybody wanted to put a bullet in. I was certainly there. But all of a sudden, I got this feeling when I was watching the news one day. And I thought, if he knew who he was, he wouldn't be who he is. Anything contrary to what Heavenly Father wants us to be is simply ignorance. It's just lack of knowledge. It's not their fault, because they wouldn't be on earth if they weren't worthy to be. It's our fault that they haven't heard the gospel until we have touched everyone we can possibly touch. Those of us who have it are responsible for those who do not, because they're only there because they don't know who they are.
Is there something, Tony, is there something in life that you know to be true because you learned it the hard way? Some would argue we only learn the hard way, right? Some would argue that we only learn through painful experiences. Is there something that you're carrying and you know to be true because of a hard thing that you endured?
Absolutely everything that I have attained has occurred because of my own stupidity and ignorance and ignoring that still small voice that everyone thinks belongs to someone else. It's easy to assume or accept that the prophet, before he does anything, oh my gosh, he knows what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing every minute of every day. Well, of course not. He's a human being. But that still small voice, he listens to. How many of us truly do, and how many times do you, after you didn't listen to it, remember hearing it and wishing you had taken that other path, or wishing you had listened to, that's not really a good thing to do, but you do it anyway, and you realize after having done so and get recompensed for it for whatever reason, there was a way out. You just simply didn't listen. The Holy Ghost is with every single one of us, whether we have been gifted with it or not. But those of us who have been gifted with it need to use it and be grateful for that gift and give it to someone else. Everything I have grown to be, I can't think of one thing that didn't come from being an idiot. It's just basically, I knew better, but it's very rare that I can look back and say, okay, the Spirit told me to do this, so I did it. That's a different me now, because I pray about everything before I do anything, because I know the Spirit is there. I know it is real. And I know that if I'm left to my own judgment, well, I know what I used to be, and that guy's dead and buried. I would say just slow down and listen to that still small voice. There is no one that isn't worthy of receiving it if they believe and have faith in themselves and know, as much as their mother and father love them, how much more our Heavenly Father loves us. And even though he knows before it happens, it hurts him when he sees that it brings you pain. He's our Father, and I'm so very grateful that he is.
Tony, we've spent some time talking about your journey, and it's been awesome. It's been fun to listen to where you've been and how you've listened and how you've grasped onto those things that have brought you to where you are now in your life. You mentioned at the beginning of the show the name of the show, Richest Men in Town, and the theme of the show. And obviously, when Mike and I talk about Richest Men in Town, we're blessed in that we get to talk to people like you that inspire us to be better. What does it mean to you, Tony, to be considered the richest man in town?
You will be privileged to teach the gospel throughout all the earth. And I'm thinking, really? And how is that supposed to happen? Am I supposed to give a talk from the pulpit in Salt Lake? Am I supposed to write a book? What am I supposed to do? Be what he's asked absolutely every one of us to be. I was told that the opportunity would be available. And when I joined the church, the very first calling I got was ward mission leader. And it was only because the guy that was before had moved and they didn't have anybody. And I had help with it. And it was great. But the next ward I went to, they made me ward mission leader. And the next ward I went to would be Shasta Lake. 8 years. I was ward mission leader. And when I came to Shasta View, the bishop asked me if I would be interested in a calling. And I said, yeah, but don't put me with the scouts. You have to first be one. I never made it out of tenderfoot. I am not a leader in that direction. And he says, well, how do you feel about ward mission leader? And I just looked at him and I said, why? And I said, no, it's just too much paperwork. And there's just, I loved it, but it's very, very involving, very draining. And he says, well, how about assistant ward mission leader? I said, that'll work. As long as I have someone that can work with me and there's someone to turf things off to, that'll work. Yeah, I'd love to. 2 weeks after I was made assistant ward mission leader, the ward mission leader moved. I'm not the assistant ward mission leader anymore. And when I think of my patriarchal blessing, you will be blessed if you will live the gospel and stay on the straight and narrow path. You will be blessed that you will be able to teach the gospel throughout all the earth. And I thought, okay, I have to work with the missionaries. That's one thing. Genealogy, that's another thing. I don't know. All I know is that I feel fulfillment now at this point in my life, that now I know what I'm supposed to do. Keep it going. Keep it going.
Keep it going.
I love it, man.
Tony, you are a rich man, brother. And I just want to come in and correct something at the beginning. You talked a little bit about maybe questions of what you were worth at one point in your life. And the worth of souls is great in the sight of God. Every one of us, right? Every one of us. You know that now. It sounds like maybe there were some seasons in your life when you wondered that and you worried about that. And I'm grateful for the circumstances and the choices that you made that have put you on the ground that you stand on today, because you're worth solid gold, brother. And I love your journey. I love your story. And I think you're a walking miracle, actually, Tony. I really do. And I think that you are evidence of that guided, guarded, and protected promise that you were given so many years ago. And it makes us makes us grateful for the hand of God in our life, right? And I think that that's been manifest tonight in our conversation tonight. So I thank you for letting us in on that.
Thank you.
It's been fun, Tony. It's been good to get to know you. I feel like, we spent some time together. It's been great, man. I've appreciated the conversation, and I'm grateful for who you are and grateful for the life that you're living. And I appreciate you sharing.
You keep going, Tony. You're not done, right? Keep going.
Well, the wonderful thing is, I know that I've accomplished a great deal, but no one is greater than the company they keep. That's what it is. We're all brothers and sisters, and we're all the same package.
Amen.
I wouldn't be who I am if it weren't for the company that I keep.
Well, thank goodness for girls in the park.
Well, we appreciate you, and we're grateful for you sacrificing some time tonight to be with us and sharing with our listeners your journey and your rich life, Tony. It's been a ton of fun, and it's been powerful tonight. So thank you. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Sorry about the blubbers.
No,
it happens from time to time on the show.
Yeah, that's right.
I think it comes with the process. You have a good night, Tony. Thanks again for coming.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you so much.
Good idea, Ernie. A toast to my big brother George, the richest man in town.